Well, good evening, everybody. All four of us. There's a few more than that here, but we're thankful for everybody that made it out. It's been a rough couple weeks for not just my family, but a lot of families in the church and in the community dealing with sickness. And just really thankful that we're getting through it, I think. So we're going to be in, of course, the book of Isaiah tonight. I'm going to pick up in chapter 3. Isaiah, last time I spoke, which thank you, Roger, for covering for us last week. Yeah, I saw that. So last message I taught anyway in Isaiah was in chapter 2, and it spoke of the promise of Christ's kingdom, when the swords are turned into plowshares and Jesus is going to sit on the throne in Jerusalem. And so tonight we're going to see Isaiah describing what a nation looks like during its darkest hour, right? So what we call the tribulation period or the time of Jacob's trouble. What does a nation look like when it's going to go through that sort of trouble? What does the world look like when all hope is lost? I think it's interesting. On Sundays, we're in that series, it's called Hope. We're talking, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians talks a little bit about these same events too. And we've mentioned in the first message in Isaiah that Paul is sort of the New Testament Isaiah, and Isaiah is sort of the Old Testament Paul. So they talk about a lot of the same things. But what does the world look like when all hope is lost? What sort of world is ready and willing to be led by the Antichrist, right? What sort of situation do you find yourself in when that seems like a good idea? So that's what we're going to get into, but let's go ahead and ask God to help us understand His Word tonight. Lord, we thank you so much for just blessing us to be able to gather together like this, both in person and online. You bless us with to live in a place and a time when just what a few short years ago would have seemed like a miracle or magic is commonplace. So Lord, we're thankful for that. We pray, Lord, that you would open the eyes of our hearts tonight. Help us to look at what you revealed through Isaiah and not only be able to understand it, but be able to understand you better. And through understanding you better, we can see what your will is for us. Lord, we pray for your blessing on the message and on the hearts of your people. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we're going to cover quite a bit of text tonight, and I think we're just going to read it and just kind of see if we can't sort it out as we go. All right, so Isaiah 3, verse 1, it says, "See now, the Lord Almighty, is about to take from Jerusalem and Judah both supply and support, all supplies of food and all supplies of water, the hero and the warrior, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the man of rank, the counselor, skilled craftsman and clever enchanter. I will make mere youths their officials, children will rule over them." Okay, so just real quick reminder, here's roughly the timeline of end time events, right? We've got the rapture when the church is taken up. Then there are a series of woes that are poured out on the earth, bad things that are happening all over the place. The Antichrist rises to power. There's more woes. There's persecution of the people who believe in the Messiah. And then we've got this big battle, and then the return of Christ, the millennial kingdom, the new heaven, new earth. This will all be on the test later, so I hope you're taking notes. So there's this timeline of events, right? And during this time that Isaiah is describing, this is the time of Jacob's trouble, is what the Old Testament called it, or the tribulation. This is after the rapture, after the church is taken away. He's describing this this period when much of the best of mankind is just not available, right? He says they take away all the craftsmen and the men of rank and the counselors, and we're in trouble because so many people are suddenly gone. And many of them held positions of authority and leadership and doctors and what kind of trouble is the world going to be in when millions of skilled Christians are suddenly not there? Kevin and I actually were talking about this on just the other day, that sometimes we look and try to figure out why, where is the United States in the end times, and what role do we play? And there's a couple references, I think, that could be a reference to America, but I think there's a good reason why there aren't a lot of references, because even as corrupt as our country is today, we still have the highest percentage of Christians in our population of any country on earth. So if the rapture were to happen today, you know what one country would be most affected? It'd be this one, right? This country would be in a lot of trouble if every Christian was suddenly gone, right? And so that's what Isaiah is describing, is this period when, what do we do, right? Where all the skilled people are gone. It says rather than statesmen that it's basically babies running things. That part I kind of feel like is already happening. Verse 5, it says, people will oppress each other, man against man, neighbor against neighbor. The young will rise up against the old, the nobody against the honored. A man will seize one of his brothers in his father's house and say, you have a cloak, you be our leader. Take charge of this heap of ruins. Imagine that's how bad it's going to be. People will be like, you're dressed nice, you be the president. Verse 7, though, but it says, but in that day, he will cry out, the guy that they're grabbing by his coat. And he says, I have no remedy. I have no food or clothing in my house. Do not make me the leader of the people. So during that time, the world will just be desperate for leadership, any kind of leadership. The best leaders have leadership thrust on them. I've always thought it was funny that, if someone wants to be president, like if you get up and you wake up in the morning and you go, you know who is the best person to run the entire earth? Me. You're probably not a very mentally healthy person, right? That's a very narcissistic thing. So like the person who thinks they should be the leader should not be the leader. And we've seen that in the scripture. Moses had leadership thrust upon him, and he was a good leader because he was a reluctant leader. Joshua followed in his footsteps after him. We've seen, a few presidents through the years that, became reluctant leaders and did pretty well. But the ones that really crave power almost certainly should not have it. Verse 8 says, Jerusalem staggers, Judah is falling. Their words and deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. The look on their faces testifies against them. They parade their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them, they have brought disaster upon themselves. Sin progresses. It's just what it does. It grows. First we're ashamed of it and we hide it. And eventually we just get used to it and we do it openly. The alcoholic will hide their problem for quite a while until they just don't bother anymore and they're openly the town drunk. In my lifetime, there are certain sins that that were once completely socially unacceptable, that were done in the shadows and now are proudly put on display. And I think you can think of some things like that yourself. And Isaiah describes that's the condition that the world is in at this time. Verse 10, he says, though, tell the righteous, it will be well with them, for they will enjoy the fruit of their deeds. He says, the people that are not doing this, tell them to hang in there. And Paul echoes this in the New Testament. In Galatians 6, verse 9, he says, let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. Right? Same basic thought. I was reading about, the locusts, how we've got a issue here in the States this year with, what are those bugs that are really loud? Cicadas, yeah. And it just kind of got me thinking about, they're really not that big of a deal. They're just annoying here. But I got to reading about locusts, and there are years in South Africa when locusts will swarm the land and they eat everything. They just eat all the crops. And a hard winter always follows that. But the year following the year of the locusts brings some of the greatest harvests, because the bodies of all those locusts, they die in the field and they serve as fertilizer. And so South Africa plans around it. They plan around the year of the locust. They know that they're going to have a year of leanness followed by a great harvest. I think, I've seen that in my own life, that there are seasons of deep distress, right? When things are just really difficult. And you feel like, how am I going to get through this? And just one thing after another. And it's always during those times that God is working something. He's always working, especially in those lean times, in those dark times. Isaiah reminds us, Paul reminds us that if you're going through a difficult season right now, God is with you. He's working things together for the good. And I'm always, whenever people are going through really trying times, I'm always curious to see what's going to come next. Because, if you're going through a difficult time, God's preparing you for something good. We'll read on here. Verse 11, he says, woe to the wicked. It will go badly with him, for what he deserves will be done to him. And again, Paul echoes this in the New Testament, right? Galatians 6, 7, he says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. All right, Isaiah 3, verse 12, he says, O my people, their oppressors are children. I have 6 kids. I can relate to that. There are times when it feels like the kids run the show. The inmates are running the asylum. He says, their oppressors are children, and women rule over them. O my people, those who guide you lead you astray and confuse the direction of your paths. Now that can sound like insulting to children and women, right, that the way he worded this. But this was really just a turn of phrase. He's basically saying, the people that, culturally at that time, men should be leaders. And really, scripturally, men should be leaders. And he's saying they are definitely not. Where are the real men? They're not doing their job, is basically what he's saying. And he goes on to point out how, they're mistreating the poor, and then he turns his attention toward what I think is one of the truest barometers of a culture, and that's the behavior of that culture's women. It tells us a lot about where a culture is and where it's headed. And so we'll look here, verse 16. It says, moreover, the Lord said, because the daughters of Zion are proud and walk with heads held high and seductive eyes and go along with mincing steps and tinkle the bangles on their feet. Therefore the Lord will afflict the scalp of the daughters of Zion with scabs, and the Lord will make their foreheads bare. In that day the Lord will take away the beauty of their anklets, headbands, crescent ornaments, dangling earrings, bracelets, veils, headdresses, ankle chains, sashes, perfume boxes, amulets, finger rings, nose rings, festal robes, outer tunics, cloaks, money purses, hand mirrors, undergarments, turbans, and veils. Now, understand, he's not saying there's anything wrong with any one of these things. But you get the picture of what he's describing, right? These women are really done up. They've got every accessory. They've got their expensive handbags and, their awesome jewelry and their designer clothes. Verse 24, now it will come about that instead of sweet perfume, there will be putrefaction. Instead of a belt, a rope. Instead of well-set hair, a plucked-out scalp. Instead of fine clothes, a donning of sackcloth. And branding instead of beauty. So he's describing this time when women are very superficial. And when the tribulation comes, all that Kardashian, Instagram filtered stuff is just going to go up in smoke, right? He says, if this is what you're most concerned with, just know that none of this is going to matter at that time. Now, he's not condemning people for wearing nice clothes or looking good or anything. But if that's where you find your value, if that's what you're most concerned with, that is a sign of a culture that's lost its way. When women are known more for their seductiveness than their dignity, it's a warning sign that that culture is ripe for judgment. All I can say is it sure looks like we're ripe for judgment. Verse 25, he says, your men will fall by the sword, and your mighty ones in battle. And her gates will lament and mourn, and deserted she will sit on the ground. Chapter 4, verse 1 says, for 7 women will take hold of one man in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. Take away our reproach. Right? He says things are going to be so bad that there's going to be so few men that 7 women will be willing to all live with one man just to survive. So this is a really encouraging message so far, right? It's really upbeat. So when things look their worst, there is some good news. Verse 2, it says, in that day, right, when things are at their worst, in that day, the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious. And the fruit of the earth will be the pride and the adornment of the survivors of Israel. The survivors of Israel. It's an interesting term. Remember, that's what this tribulation period is all about. It's about giving the remnant of Israel one last chance to believe in Jesus. Right? When we read about the end times, we kind of get lost in all the crazy, judgments and things falling out of the sky and earthquakes and all this stuff. And, we watch the movies and all the sci-fi explanations of what's going to happen, that we can kind of lose the narrative. The whole point of all that stuff is that God is giving Israel one more chance to believe in their Messiah. One last chance to believe in Jesus. Verse 5 says, then the Lord will create over the whole area of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day, even smoke, and the brightness of a flaming fire by night, For over all the glory will be a canopy. So he's using this imagery of, you may have heard this before in the Old Testament, when God was leading Israel through the wilderness. He led them with a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. And Isaiah is using that same imagery. He's like, in those days when the king returns, when Jesus comes back and sets up his throne, he's going to lead us again. Verse 6, there will be a shelter to give shade from the heat by day, and a refuge and protection from the storm and the rain. So he's just using kind of some poetic language to, remember the book started with, Isaiah presenting a picture of like a court case, right? That God comes into the courtroom and he begins to testify against Israel. He says, here are your charges. Here are the things that you've done. Here's why all this judgment has to happen. And he brings the charges against Israel, and Isaiah has essentially just been reading off God's testimony. And now he starts to change it a little bit, change from this testimony to more of a poetic thing. Basically, the Lord begins to write a song to his people. He's not just going to read them the riot act. He's going to sing them a song. He's writing them a love song or a poem. Chapter 5, verse 1, he says, excuse me, it says, let me sing now for my well-beloved, a song of my beloved concerning his vineyard. My well-beloved had a vineyard on a fertile hill. He dug it all around, removed its stones, and planted it with the choicest vine. And he built a tower in the middle of it, and also hewed out a wine vat in it. Then he expected it to produce good grapes, but it produced only worthless ones. And what do you think he's describing? Right. He made a promised land, right, for his people, a land of milk and honey. Set it up for them. He cleaned it out for them and, gave them every opportunity. He says that instead of producing good grapes, it produced only worthless ones. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? Why, when I expected it to produce good grapes, did it produce worthless ones? So now let me tell you what I'm going to do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it will be consumed. So back then, when you would plant a vineyard, you would plant hedges around the boundary of the vineyard. And the hedges served as protection. It would keep animals out. It let other property owners know where the property line was. Right? They weren't just for decoration. And he says, I will remove its hedge, and it will be consumed. I will break down its wall, and it will become trampled ground. I will lay it waste. It will not be pruned or hoed, but briars and thorns will come up. I will also charge the clouds to rain no rain on it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his delightful plant. Thus he looked for justice, but behold, bloodshed. He looked for righteousness, but behold, a cry of distress. Right, so he makes it pretty clear what he's talking about. Jesus, centuries later, used this same imagery. And it was very clear to his audience what he was talking about. Right? He said, I am the vine, you are the branches. Abide in me. Right? That's what you were designed for. And he said that we honor our Father when we bear fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. You can bear no fruit. So abide in me, and that's how you honor my Father, when you bear fruit, when you produce what it was I designed you to produce. But Israel had quit doing that. Understand that every good gift comes from him. And he says that he put a hedge of protection around his vineyard. He's put a hedge of protection around you. It's by God's grace and mercy that you made it here tonight. I appreciate that right now more than probably I have in a while. I have some friends that are not handling COVID quite as well as I did. I don't know why. I tell you one thing, I've never been more convinced that thing was bioengineered, but that's another message for another day. But the fact that you're alive right now is by God's grace and mercy. It's his protection. And right now, the world doesn't realize it, but the church is actually serving as a hedge of protection for the whole world. Once we're taken out of the equation, judgment comes. Right now, the church is a hedge of protection around the world. As long as we're here, as long as the Holy Spirit is working through the church in the world, then the tribulation won't start. Once we're gone, it does. Once we're gone, it's on like Donkey Kong. And so he begins to pronounce this series of woes on the nation, right? And he mentions that woe to the nation for there are these people who are swindling folks out of real estate, and that's one of the things God is not pleased with. And he pronounced more woes on drunkards, and then he says this in verse 11. He says, "Woe to those who rise up early in the morning, that they may pursue strong drink, who stay up late in the evening, that wine may inflame them. Their banquets are accompanied by lyre and harp, by tambourine and flute, and by wine." Now, he's already pronounced woes on drunkards before this, but now he talks about these people that basically, they look to party from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. They look to be entertained from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. Right? That lyre and harp and tambourine and flute and all that stuff. From morning to night, life is about being entertained. "But they do not pay attention to the deeds of the Lord," he says, "nor do they consider the work of his hands. Therefore, my people go into exile for their lack of knowledge." So he's describing a time and a people who are they don't have time to learn about the Lord because they're being numbed and entertained to death. Doesn't sound like today, right? You know how many times I've talked to people and they're like, "I would love to know more, I just don't have time. Don't have time to read." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, did you see the new season of Dexter?" "Oh yeah, I binged the whole thing. It was really good." I'm like, "Oh." Weird. I'm guilty. I've got, I think, every streaming service. All we've done is reinvent cable. We've got too many sources of entertainment. And God says, "My people are going into exile. My people die because of their lack of knowledge. They're being entertained to death." Verse 20, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Woe to those who are heroes in drinking wine and valiant men in mixing strong drink, who justify the wicked for a bribe and take away the rights of the ones who are in the right." who take away the rights of the ones who are in the right. I could spend a lot of time just on that verse. What do we take from all this, right? It's a bunch of woes, a bunch of things that we can all agree that are not good. Here's a few things I think we can get from it, right? God's heart is broken when we feel the need to get our value from money or things, right? From our appearance, from vanity, all those things that he pronounced woes on the people for. When we feel like we have to get our value from any of those things, that breaks his heart. He's offended when we feel the need to numb ourselves through drink and through drug and entertainment. And, in the New Testament, we're reminded to be filled with the Spirit and not all those things that are dissipation, things that waste you away. He's hurt when we parade sin, when we esteem that which should be taken down, right? When we call good what is evil and we call evil what is good. These sorts of passages, when we read through them, it can be discouraging, right? We don't come to church to be browbeat and, hear about all the ways we stink. It's discouraging when we read this stuff, but that's taking this sort of passage in the wrong way, in the wrong light. Why does it matter what God is going to judge Israel for? Why does it matter what broke his heart back then? Why does any of that matter to me today? Here's what I take from it, is because he loves me, I want to know what bothers him, right? Because he loves me so much, I want to know what honors him. I want to know what breaks his heart. We used to sing this song here, break my heart for what breaks yours. Next week, we're going to see this amazing vision of the Lord on his throne. We get to see a little detailed description of what angels really look like. And just spoiler alert, those little chubby babies, that's not what they look like. We get to see Isaiah's commission. That's when the book really starts to take off. But I just want to encourage you, when you're reading, especially in the Old Testament, and you get into these really negative seeming texts, understand what they're there for. Right? God wants you to know what breaks his heart so that it can break yours. So that what matters to him will matter to you. And because the more that what matters to him matters to you, the more like him you'll become. And the more you'll be able to share his love with others. Let me pray for you. Lord, we thank you so much that you've preserved your word for us with warts and all. Even when we read these difficult passages, it can be hard to understand, but we know they're there for a reason. God, we want to know you better and understand you more so that we can know you better and understand you more. So that our hearts can be transformed into a heart that's more and more like yours. So God, we're thankful that you've preserved your word for us. We're thankful that you've been merciful, that you've kept this hedge of protection around us, that you've used the church as a hedge of protection around the world. Lord, may we accomplish your will here and now. But Lord, we we look forward to these times. Even though there are woes, there are judgments coming, we know that there will be difficult times. We know that ultimately it leads to you on the throne and a new heaven and a new earth. And Lord, we look forward to that. So we pray that you come, and you come quickly, Lord. Pray all these things in the name of our King, our Lord Jesus. And all God's people said, amen. Ready? Break. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.